Okay, so welcome everyone. Really pleased to see you all. I'm just as excited as you are, and I'm so pleased that Aileen has all the knowledge of Labyrinth and that she is going to share it with us. So thank you, Aileen. It's over to you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for the really warm welcome, everybody, this morning. Actually, someone's pinned me, so that's helpful. I was going to say, if you want it spotlighted on me and the things I'm sharing, then do change your view from gallery to spotlight, but that's sorted already. So thank you. So I'm Aileen White. I recently lived in St Helens, but I'm now down in Canterbury. I have a family and I have been a bit of a Labyrinth nerd for the last 9 years. I came across them in the context of using labyrinths to help me slow down and reflect and get close to God when life felt very, very busy. And I really liked them because it helped me slow down and have a quiet time without having to sit down. And I was someone who found it very hard to sit down and have a quiet time. And it may well be that you meet people in your roles and in your life in the URC or in everyday life outside of the church who are similar. They're hungry for spirituality. They are keen to come close to God, but they're not so sure how to just stop or slow down or to perhaps have a quiet time, as sometimes we're taught to try and do. So labyrinths are a really lovely tool because they don't require you to sit still if you can't sit still, but they can help you sit still and trace one if you want to. So today it's a bit different to the last Labyrinth retreat I led with Dan's church because we were actually able to walk at that one, but we're going to finger trace today a labyrinth, and that is another really good way of tracing a labyrinth. So I've got one of mine here. I've got a little pile beside me from different places, and a finger tracing labyrinth tends to have some kind of groove in it that means you can actually trace round and round and round, step by step. And you can even do it if it's got grooves with your eyes closed. Now you've got a handout that looks a little bit like this, which is one of the ones that Darlene mentioned that we're definitely going to use today. And I'm going to invite you to finger trace this labyrinth. Now, there's also going to be one on the screen as well. So if you are on a fairly big screen, you could finger trace the labyrinth that's on your screen a bit later in the session. Now, as well as being a labyrinth nerd, that's kind of carried on and developed, and I've run retreats and used labyrinths with lots of different people, men and women, all sorts of ages, in the context of birth preparation, in schools, for a cancer charity, with churches, and with those who would say they have faith and have none. We even got the labyrinth out in the town hall in St Helens, and that was fantastic, in one of their really big rooms, and enabled people at a vegan winter fair to walk a labyrinth. So there's loads of different ways you can use one. Now, I'm really aware that some of you may not know anything about a labyrinth at all. So I want to invite you today to find out a little bit more. And if you find that I give you too much information today, then please don't feel you have to remember all of it. Let what kind of strikes you or resonates with you stay, and let God help that mull over inside you. And if lots of it's too much, then just let it go for today, and perhaps it will come back when you need that information later on, or perhaps you can watch the video later. I wanted to invite you in the chat to share with me now if there's anything you definitely want me to cover today, if there's something you're hoping I will include. So this is a little bit of an opportunity for you to interact and to have a say about what we do. And there's enough time to try and make sure that we cover your questions as well. So right now, if you want to get up the chat at the bottom of your screen and add in there a little sentence that says, I'm really hoping you'll cover X, Y, and Z, or I'd really love to know such and such. And then Dalian's going to help me within the session to make sure that we answer your questions as well. So while you do that, I'm just going to have a little drink, and hopefully we will have some questions come up in the chat in a moment. So while you share your questions in the chat, I'm just going to share screen because I've got lots of pictures I want to share with you today, and lots of information that hopefully will help answer your questions and help you think about how to use a labyrinth in your context where you live. Okay, so while you keep adding in the chat, please do feel free to do that throughout the session. I want to give you a little bit of an introduction about labyrinths. So labyrinths are an ancient pattern or symbol that has been used for centuries. And here on the slide, you can see perhaps one of the first ever labyrinths that we think we found, which is about 4,000 years old. So labyrinths are something that has been used in ancient times. And then they've had resurgences kind of periodically. They've come back up as something that people use again and again. So then next to that, we've got the Jericho Labyrinth, which is a little while after Jesus was around on a Bible. And then to the right of that, we've got medieval labyrinths, and how Christianity took labyrinths as a symbol for themselves and used them especially in a kind of 4-section pattern. Oops, sorry, just bring that back again. I'm just moving the pictures of you guys on the screen across so I can see these pictures on the slide. So the medieval labyrinths tend to be in 4 sections, and you may have seen a Chartres labyrinth, which is one of the most famous labyrinths in the world, that's in a cathedral, a church in Paris. And then labyrinths also get used in all the continents of the world. So we've got here in Israel, in Spain, in Europe, even in the southwest of America. More recently, in 1915, labyrinths were used for basket weave and jewellery as a pattern. And then most recently, taking one of your labyrinths that are in Lancashire, because I know many of you are here from Lancashire, you will probably recognise, if you've ever been to Clitheroe Castle, a labyrinth that was made in 2006. And at the time, that was the only labyrinth in Lancashire, or at least that's what the newspaper headlines say. So one of your very beautiful labyrinths at Clitheroe Castle is absolutely stunning, and it's free to use. You can just turn up, it's in the park, and use that labyrinth. Now, labyrinths look a little bit like a maze, and you might be looking at them thinking, oh, that looks a bit like a maze. And some people mix them up for a maze. And in fact, in the dictionary and in our everyday words, we probably mix up the word labyrinth and maze as if they're the same thing. Or you may have heard labyrinth in the context of the David Bowie movie, and you might have even been wondering if that was what we were going to talk about today. And when you use labyrinths with the public, just be aware they may well think you're talking about the David Bowie movie, because that's the most famous context for labyrinths. You can even make a little joke about that if it helps break the ice. But labyrinths are a pattern where you have a winding path that goes in and in and in and in gradually to a center. And then that path gets followed on the same path, but in reverse on the way back and forth, round and round, back out in a return to whatever's after. Now, depending on what someone chooses to focus on will depend what that journey into something and what that journey back out will be. In our context, we might say it's a journey in to spend time with God, and then the journey back out into the world after. Or we might say it was the journey into something very significant that happened in our lives, like the death of a loved one, or moving house, or preparing for birth, or some other context. I've used it with kids in school to that journey in to when they're going to go to secondary school. and then what it will be like perhaps as they work out who they are in the new context in the secondary school. So using it for transition can be really, really good, because journeys, because labyrinths represent a journey, and they provide the user with a journey, whether they're tracing round and round and round, or whether they're walking round and round and round. And you can use them if you're looking at using them with the Bible. You could use them with stories in the Bible that include a journey. So some obvious ones would, especially for Lent, would be the journey on the donkey, Palm Sunday, would be the journey to the cross, could be the journey on the Emmaus Road afterwards. I've also used it in the context of looking at the story in the Old Testament of Hagar, and how Hagar had to run away and she met God. And then God told her he was the God who sees and sees her. But there's lots of different ways that you can apply a labyrinth. And what I've done is I've given you a handout that actually gives you lots of ideas as well. So on this handout that we're going to use in the session, there's a few ideas down the side of how to actually, what to think about as you're tracing or walking. And then on this handout, which you probably haven't printed for today, but you could print afterwards, it's got the little introduction about labyrinths being ancient symbols for a journey, how they're used in all the continents of the world, in all religions of the world, and how they help people to pray and meditate. And then underneath, you've got a whole list of where you can find labyrinths close to you. So I've tried to make them all in the Northwest, especially around Manchester, and then around Lancashire, and then a little bit further north in Cumbria. There are also lots of labyrinths in places like Merseyside and Liverpool and Cheshire, if you want, to get those as well. But on the other side, you can print this as a double-sided handout when you're actually working with people if you want. There's a whole load more ideas about the kind of things that people could focus on when they walk a labyrinth. So in a minute, I'm going to invite you to finger trace a labyrinth, and you can choose what you want to reflect on as you do it. Now, labyrinths can be really helpful just to slow down. So as you walk, you may want to finger trace around this labyrinth. You can see the pattern, the same pattern on the screen as is on your handout. So if you've got this printed, you could trace on your printout. If you haven't got it printed, you could actually trace on the screen in front of you if it's big enough to do that and you're not on a little phone. So as you trace, it's very natural for your mind to wander and think about things. And that's one of the great tools about labyrinths. That's one of the things they're really good at, is to help you think. And that's why sometimes you get them in universities or schools. But they're also really good for helping slow down. So what you might do, and the first idea on this handout is, as you trace, is to focus on your breathing. So just slow your breathing down, and you could trace, you could move forward as you breathe in and then pause as you breathe out. Forward as you breathe in and pause as you breathe out. Move forward as you breathe in and pause as you breathe out. And it will really slow yourself down. And if that's helpful to you, then that can be a really good tool. Another idea is to use a mantra or affirmation or scripture and actually repeat something over yourself as you walk. And one of the first times I led a labyrinth retreat, there was a lady there who was feeling really anxious about having to go and see her dad. And she was seeing him on the afternoon, and I was doing the retreat with her in the morning. And she decided on her labyrinth, she was going to walk around telling herself, I am good enough and I'm worthy to be loved. I am good enough and I'm worthy to be loved. I am good enough and I'm worthy to be loved. Because she'd been telling herself that she wasn't, because that's what she'd heard over and over again from her father. And she went in really anxious, but because she repeated that over herself, all the way into the center and all the way back out again, she came back a different woman in half an hour. It was amazing, the change in her. And she really needed that to prepare herself and ground herself before meeting her dad. That's just one example, but you might repeat Jesus Christ, Son of God, as you breathe in, have mercy on us as you breathe out, the classic Jesus prayer. Or you might breathe in, be still and know, and breathe out that I am God. Whichever word speaks to you, you could choose one of those today. Or you could use it to weigh up the answer to a question. And I love this one because sometimes we need tools to help us discern. And discern's one of those special Christian words or religious words that's about weighing up and making a decision. And sometimes we need tools to help us make big decisions. So you could walk around the labyrinth asking God your questions, what you're wondering about and you're trying to make a decision about. Or if you've already asked your questions and you're trying to decide between two answers, then you could walk into the labyrinth imagining what it would be like to go with answer one. And then you could walk out of the labyrinth imagining what it would be like to go with answer two. And see how it feels as you walk. Does one feel calmer and more hopeful? Does another feel a bit more anxiety-inducing? Does one feel like, oh, I've got some things I'd need to do, but it's manageable? Or does the other feel, actually, that would be really easy and I can just flow with that? Perhaps that's the right way to go. So there's 3 ideas for your labyrinth walk this morning. If none of those stick out for you and you just want to trace and see what comes up, that's absolutely fine as well. So I love to teach in a really practical way. So we've had enough of me talking. We're now going to do a labyrinth meditation. So I invite you to get your hand out or trace on the screen. You trace between the walls on this design. Okay, so when you trace, you can actually see on the handout, if I bring this up close enough, there's a little arrow, and we're going to trace between the walls on this handout and go round. And you can trace nice and slowly. It's not a race with a labyrinth. It's absolutely okay to slow down and trace slowly. And you trace slowly into the center. Okay, and you'll find it weaves round back and forth, just like life has a habit of weaving back and forth, round and round. And you can pause on the way if you want. Pause as you go, and you can pause in the center. You can talk to God on the way or repeat that mantra or focus on your breathing as you go. And then when you get to the center, take a little time. There's no hurry. We've got time this morning for all the questions you have, all the teaching I've got, and to enjoy this experience. And then on the reverse, you just, if you were walking, you'd turn 180 in the middle and walk the same path back out again, back and forth, round and round the curves of the labyrinth. So I'm going to play a little bit of music that helps just set a nice calm atmosphere. And I invite you to adjust the volume on your device so that the music is just nice for you, not too loud and not too quiet. I'm going to change the tone of my voice so that it's quite relaxing, like I would lead a meditation with a group. So again, adjust the volume so that it's really comfortable for you to sit back, wriggle and fidget and get in a comfortable position, and then to trace your labyrinth when the music's playing. What I'll do to help you just get into that space of calming down, slowing down, thinking and reflecting, I'm going to read a poem while the music plays, and then I'll invite you to start tracing your labyrinth. And sometimes people need this. If you're actually leading something with people, they need to be led into this opportunity gradually, because to go from really busy life to finger tracing a labyrinth can be, it just doesn't really work. And they need that call, that invitation, that little journey into this opportunity. So I'm going to do that with this poem. I invite you to get comfortable where you are. If you want to sit in a slightly different place or the floor or sit on a bed or whatever, then do get comfortable where you are. I'm going to play the music. I'm going to read the poem. And then you'll actually see on the screen some little arrows come up in case you need the reminder as you trace. And I'm going to just let that music play so that you have this opportunity. If you find that you trace really quickly and then you're done, you can trace a second time, or you can look at some of the handouts, or you could start to think about how this might be interesting in your own spiritual life or in the lives of the people that you love and you care for and you serve, so that you've got something to do while other people just take the time they need to trace this morning. So let's get comfortable. And I invite you to wriggle and fidget, get comfortable on your chair. Perhaps take a few deep breaths. Just to slow yourself down a bit. Just to take the time you need this morning for you. And I'm adjusting the volume on my computer, and I invite you to do the same. Get it so the sound's just right for you. And slowing down your breath and taking a nice deep breath in and a longer breath out can help signal to your brain that now's time to relax. And it's okay. You can let go. So I'm going to read a poem just to get us started. And then when you're ready, I invite you to trace on the screen or on your handout and follow the path. It has no dead ends, no right or wrongs, no having to be correct or perfect. So this poem is called Journey Within. Step by step, turn by turn, cast all your cares aside. As you walk the path of wonder, meet the beauty surrounding you like an old friend. Step by step, turn by turn. Look closely and listen carefully to life moving about as you walk and trace along. Hear this place sing to you its welcome song. Step by step, turn by turn. Meet yourself in a new perspective, a you that seems like a shadow in the glare of modern demands and distractions. This is the real you. With love, you move from the shadows into the light. Step by step, turn by turn, your thoughts, both familiar and new, begin to dance gracefully together. You feel fresh energy swirling playfully around you as you keep walking and tracing with perfect trust, the spiral path stretching before you. Step by step, turn by turn, you reach the spacious center. The music of the moment lightens your heart, and you meet the spirit of wisdom. With her, there is peace, maybe joy. step by step and turn by turn. You walk around the center, then choose a place to be still. A moment. You linger, soaking up this chance meeting with a vibrant, colourful, sparkling world you've forgotten existed. Step by step and turn by turn. You feel younger as you step out of the centre. You step back onto the path, which will lead you on a journey to the world you left behind. A world waiting for you to manifest your unique wisdom and magic. So in your own time and in your own way, I invite you to start tracing your labyrinth. So if you're still tracing your labyrinth, then please do carry on. Don't let us interrupt you. We've only been tracing for 5 minutes, and actually that's not very long. Some people find 5 minutes feels like forever, and some people feel like 5 minutes is really, really not enough time at all. So if you need to and you want to keep tracing, just turn down the volume on your device so that you can carry on tracing without being interrupted. If you have an insight or something that was really meaningful for you while you were walking, then I invite you to add that to the chat, because we can learn from each other as much as you're going to learn from me today. And I'm going to learn from you and the questions you ask and the experiences you had. In fact, listening to people's experiences of walking a labyrinth has taught me so much. And that's why I invite you to try some things after this session, because it's in trying and the walking yourself and the listening to others who have walked a labyrinth that you'll learn and get confident in trusting the process and in trusting the Holy Spirit, which is God, to do the work in people's lives as they walk. So if you have an insight or an experience you are happy to share and you want to add it in the chat, please do that now. I've got some questions that I'm going to invite you to discuss together. And we're actually going to use some breakout rooms so you can discuss them in small groups. Because we've got a very large group here today, it wouldn't really work to ask questions amongst 30 odd people. But we wanted to give you time to discuss and wonder and learn from each other today through the breakout rooms. So here's some questions you can use, and you may have questions of your own. What surprised you about the experience of tracing the labyrinth? Or what did you discover? And perhaps that's something you'd be willing to share in the chat. Without needing to tell us any details, what did you focus on as you traced? Was it one of the ideas on the handout or something else? Or did you find you started by thinking about one thing and then found that God or your subconscious brought something else up? And that's what you needed to think about instead. And if there's time, what other things, what other ideas do you have of the things that people could reflect on as they traced the labyrinth? So I'm going to ask Darlene to put you in some smaller groups so that you can discuss these questions. I'll copy and paste them into the chat as well, so that I'm not sure if you can see the chat in breakout rooms, but if you can, then you'll have the questions to hand. Those who are facilitating the groups, thank you so much for helping everybody join in and for making sure that your groups feel like they're encouraged to share or feel safe to share. These are the questions that facilitators you can use. Just really simply, what have people experienced or discovered? What did they focus on as they traced? And do they have other ideas about what someone might focus on as they traced or walked a labyrinth? And we want to give you, if we've got, say, 6 people in each group, then if you have only 2 minutes each, then we need to make the breakout rooms at least 12 minutes long for you to each get 2 minutes. And 2 minutes isn't very much. So if I just check in with Darlene, how does that sound? At least 2 minutes each?
Yeah, that sounds good. I have to say I made the breakout rooms smaller, so there's only 4 to 5 people in a room.
Okay.
So there's only now 5 rooms. So
Okay.
in room 1, Linda Lunn is your facilitator. Room 2, Kath Atkinson. Room 3, Jackie Embray. Room 4, Jenny. And room 5 is Nadine.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So at least 10 minutes, because that gives everybody 2 minutes each. All right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Aileen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think Lauren said a tech issue, Aileen. You need to optimize your sound to play direct from your computer sound. Otherwise, it's very disjointed. Oh, so what he meant.
Yeah, there's a thing to tick, isn't there?
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Thank you for flagging that up. Yeah.
That's okay. I'm just looking. Is it just me and you outside?
No, at the moment we've got Lawrence, Dan, Alice, and Fliss still here.
Oh, Alice and Fliss. So we have to. Can you maybe just stop sharing screen so I can just see? Because
what we need to do, Darlene, is because we're hosts or whatever, we're not automatically in the rooms.
Yeah,
so at the bottom of your screen, there's a breakout room thing. If we click on it, then we can each join a room.
Okay, Lawrence, but we have to get Alice and Fliss first into a room because they dropped out and then they came back in, so I didn't put them in a room.
Yes, so you can either assign them or so where do you want them to go?
They can go in any room, maybe room 5 with Nadine.
Okay. That's done.
Okay, is that oh yeah, they're gone. Yeah, because we were co-hosts, I couldn't put us in a room. So
we can join a room if we want to.
Right.
I'd like that, yeah.
By click on the breakout room button at the bottom, and then you can see that it comes up and we can join any room. So
okay, I might stay because I don't know how to get people out of their rooms again.
Yeah. It would help.
Close it.
It would help, Darlene, as well, for me to just check in with you about what the chat says and stuff like that before people come back.
Okay. Yeah, I think, Lawrence, leave me and Aileen here.
Okay. I'll
That's
go to
okay.
one of the rooms.
Yeah, put me
Thanks
in
so
as
much,
well.
Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence.
Okay.
It's a good job you are here this morning. Okay, so
I'm off to room 4. Dan?
okay,
Can you
Did
put me
say
in
that?
one?
Sorry?
Can you put me in a room as well?
Yeah, sure. Where would you like to go?
I don't mind. Anyway,
Okay, I'll put you in room 4 and I'll go into another one.
thank you.
right. I'm just going to set a timer to get them back. Otherwise,
yeah. Hello, Lawrence.
Hi.
Yeah, so what are the books, Lee?
Okay, so it looks like everybody's back. So I wanted to give a little bit of time to the 5 facilitators. If people actually shared something that you feel would be helpful for others to hear, or if people had questions, and then I can make a note of them and make sure that we cover those before we finish. We had 5 facilitators. Perhaps, Darlene, if you could just let us know who they were, and we could perhaps hear a little bit from them if there's something relevant to share.
room
Darlene,
1 is Linda. So, Linda, is there something you would like to share?
Yes, I was in a group with Kerry, Carol, Hilary and Brenda. And I think one thing, well, what surprised everyone about their experience was that things were very different for everybody. A couple of people hadn't even got to the centre before the 5 minutes was up. Although initially thought that she would do it twice, thought that she would be really, really quick. There was 2 people who didn't get round and finished, if you like. The whole feeling was about it being very, very relaxing. And one person Kerry did a chant from the poem. There was a phrase in the poem, Aileen, that the spirit of wisdom, and she did the breathing meditation bit and then added other areas. She was looking forward to getting to the centre, but didn't actually make it. Someone else was very relaxed about the breathing and expected, because they're very busy, to feel full of words. But actually that person's mind went blank, which we thought was lovely, because that appeared to be what that particular person needed. And we thought again that was intriguing, because there's a lot going on in her life, and that tracing made her feel very calm. She was very happy to be in one place. Another person found that just the music was a little bit distorted, Aileen. I think that's coming through the system, but would thought that would be really good when you were on your own. Also, an interesting point that someone made was who found the tracing on paper a bit distracting, because they were looking where they were going. And actually, that person had quite a bit of experience of walking labyrinths, and find that on a labyrinth that she was just looking at what was ahead and not sort of focusing about where she was going, and so on. People have used the a synod labyrinth as well. A suggestion that was made was that the paper one you could pick up at any time of the day, and maybe not just use your problems, but bring questions and problems to it, but either bring just an open mind, or bring your joy. If there's been something in particular that you find very joyful, bring that as you're going into the labyrinth, and see what happens. And also that people themselves should not feel any pressure whatsoever to get to the center or to get out again. That to just take a deep breath and go with whatever happens to them, which will be different on different days. But we felt it was very, very useful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your feedback. Lots of what you said resonated with the experience I've had myself, and with watching others go through this and experience this. You talk in theory about labyrinths, but it's not until you trace or walk one that you discover what can come up for you. And it usually brings up things that people don't expect. So on the handout, this handout, I've actually said on it, please be gentle with yourself, because labyrinths have a habit of doing this.
So basically, don't put any pressure on yourself of any kind. That was our conclusion.
I would agree totally. It's something to be experienced and see what comes up. And then does that speak to you at all? You know, if you get lost in it, does that speak to you? If you get to the center and then just want to walk out because you've had enough, does that speak to you? You know, if you thought you'd know what you're doing, but actually when you got there, it changed, does that speak to you? Or is it just an interesting, curious experience? And yeah, it's the things that you've experienced are what is very common in a session. Everybody will have a different experience. Some people will walk it really, really quickly. Some people will take much longer. And like you said, some people didn't even get to the middle in 5 minutes. And yeah, I mean, I've done 5 minutes today because I know that some people will find that an awful long time. And some people will be like, look, I do retreats a lot. And 5 minutes is nothing. Give me more time, you know. So when you're planning a session, factor that in. You know that some people will really want to take their time, and some people will be done really fast because especially if they're not used to doing anything like that before. Thank you so much for sharing.
Aileen, before we carry on, people were just asking, can we maybe take the screen down now while we chat so we can just see the faces, because it feels, that's it.
No worries. There we go.
That's good. So we can see all of the people. So the next one is room 2, and it's Kath. If Kath wants to share briefly.
Oh, yes. So yeah, we spoke about how we all sense that slowing down. Some of us wanted to close our eyes. Naturally, we would want to close our eyes, but we needed to be able to trace it. And that sense of just going with the flow was another comment somebody made. Needed to just go with the flow. We talked about, Lawrence mentioned about Psalm 23, about using that in a prayerful way whilst walking the labyrinth, while tracing. We talked about breathing prayer, breath prayers, using that. Lee, you did something really interesting, Lee. Do you want to just share? I don't know if Lee's... Oh,
You're unmuted.
Oh,
Muted.
you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. I've just recently had COVID, and I've definitely still got COVID brain. And so I felt like I just couldn't, had to kind of, so anyway, I wrote a labyrinth because I felt like I had words that I needed to get out before I could find any kind of stillness. So I just challenged myself to sit with the words rather than trying to, if my mind's blank at the moment at the best of times. And so I felt I was losing the opportunity to do anything meaningful with it unless I could kind of put words to it. But that helped me get the words out of the way before I got to actually thinking about it. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We talked about transitions as well and how useful it would be. You mentioned about schools and that transition there. We talked about vocationally, how it could be used vocationally. For me, I was thinking about the journey of life, actually, and if God is the centre, how life doesn't just take us in a straight line to the centre, how we meander and we double back and we make mistakes, and that's the journey of our life as well, isn't it? And we recognise that nothing else is needed. That before we came onto this session, some of us thought we might have needed extra things to go with the labyrinth, but actually nothing else is needed. Yeah.
Thank you, Kath.
Thank you so
Really
much.
good feedback. So next is Jackie, room 3.
Yeah, I think we all appreciated slowing down. There were certainly comments about it would be good to have a wooden one so that you could close your eyes and concentrate in a different way, and that we might, use our own music and that would help. 2 or 3 people felt, that people are under a lot of strain of various different sorts at the moment, and so there was a big need for me time and actually just having that short break when I'm thinking about me rather than everything else or everyone else. And also 2 or 3 folk felt they left something in the centre and came back a bit lighter, and that seemed really positive.
Thank you, Jackie. And then room 4 is Jenny.
Right, so our group struggled a little bit because some of us weren't quite prepared for this morning and the fact that we were going to be actually doing a labyrinth. And so we had quite a long and helpful conversation about how we prepare, so we get ourselves ready to be in that space, and how we might do that with others when they're joining with us if we run our labyrinths for ourselves. And we had an interesting conversation about the link between actually doing a labyrinth and seeing what it's about and experiencing it, which enables us to see how we might be able to help others and enable others to walk a labyrinth as well, in whatever way that might be. So one really interesting comment was about the fact that someone had used the quote, the little quote that you'd used about being good enough, because when they went into the labyrinth, they had a lot of chaotic and they weren't feeling particularly safe, or that kind of feelings. So having that little quote there was really supportive for them in walking the labyrinth. And we sort of discussed there might be a different set, like a little set almost of different things that we could offer to people, so who are going in different ways with different things. We had a sense of the feeling of being able to look at things, and there was quite creative processes for some people, even if they didn't have the answers. A lot of different ideas had come up as just walking it. We also kind of were clear, other people have spoken about not being able to finish it, but that there's a kind of a artificiality about the process today, that felt like a bit of a limit on us. And I think most of our group were going, oh, is it time to stop yet, or is it not? So we thought in a different time and place where we had that space, it would be a different experience for us. We talked about the different ways of doing labyrinths, and that the physical is always quite an important aspect of it, whether it's putting a finger to a piece of paper or feeling the wood or walking it. We thought it was something that we would be encouraged to take forward to share with others. Is that it?
Thank you, Jenny. And last but not least is Nadine.
Thank you. We found that for a lot of us, it was quite a calming experience, having sort of come from a busy week and a busy time, but to be able to just center, to focus, to find our breathing and to calm down was very helpful. Also, it was shared a lovely labyrinth that was done where the participants created the labyrinth by having things that they put down as they were walking along, and then created the shape of the labyrinth. That sounded like a brilliant way of doing things. Some of us felt it felt like it was 5 minutes, but that felt like a really long time. Was it only 5 minutes? And then others felt that went by really quickly, flew by. But that the labyrinth was a wonderful way of creating a kind of sense of focus and calm. And also we spoke about walking a labyrinth and how that is different and can be a very different experience. They sound like some plans to do a labyrinth on Holy Isle, which sounds incredible, and I would certainly want to go to something like that. I think it sounds like the perfect place for one up north. I think that's it.
Thank you, Nate. And now we're back to Aileen. Really helpful comments.
Yeah, really, really insightful. And just the diversity of experiences, I think, is really key for you to know. Don't expect, you don't go in, as a facilitator, don't go in expecting certain outcomes, and don't perhaps even explain from the start so that people are prepared that something might come up that they don't expect themselves. Let them know to be gentle with themselves. As one of you said, let them know they don't have to be good enough in this. It's not about getting it right, getting it wrong. When I do sessions that are guided, I usually have intercessors praying at the same time. And if possible, have people there who can pray with people before or after walking the labyrinth, because it's not unusual that I will get people crying before or after, because they will choose to walk something that is significant to them and moves them. So yeah, creating a safe container for this, especially if you're doing a guided session, is really important. And it was lovely what one of you said about labeling up a labyrinth. I've done that with people. If they've been through something very significant in their life, preparing for birth, the death of a loved one, a change of job, a move of house, something like that, they can actually label up the labyrinth with the milestones of the journey they've been through. And it can actually help them process and think about the experience they've had. So yes, so many of you have just shared such wonderful insights. Thank you. In terms of you as future facilitators, I invite you to trace or walk a labyrinth yourself as regularly as you can, because that will give you more insight as well as helping create a space for others. And that handout here has got a whole list of places near you where you can find walking labyrinths. And if you live somewhere else, I know at least one of you's down south like me, at the bottom of that handout, there are 2 URLs for labyrinth databases. And these help you find labyrinths wherever you are. So if you're on holiday, or if you live somewhere other than the Northwest, those 2 websites can help you find labyrinths in other places so that you can build up your experience of a labyrinth yourself. Now, in the chat, we had quite a lot of questions about, well, this is great, but how do we start? How do we get going? Or how do we use it in specific contexts with specific people? So in this second part of the session, I wanted to explain some of that with you. And hopefully, as I do that, I will weave in the different contexts that you asked about in the chat. So I'm going to share screen again. And we're going to move on from our questions to look a bit more about how do you actually do this with others. So the first thing, I think, is to think, what kind of event do I want, or what kind of experience do I want to offer? Do I want something that's just pop up and walk, that maybe there's a welcomer, maybe there's a handout, but it's very much self-facilitated, just go and experience it? That's a bit like the one we did at the town hall was a bit like that. We had handouts, we had finger tracing labyrinths, we had the big labyrinth, and then we had a welcomer. And they explained a bit about labyrinths, they gave them the handout, and then they just let people experience it. And then they were there afterwards if people had questions or insights or things they wanted to share. So it was, they turned up when they wanted, they walked when they wanted. It was very free flow, and it was actually part of a bigger event with other things on. Or you might do this in a car park at church, or the garden at church, or in a hall. You might have it out at a Christmas fair if you've got more than one hall, different things like that, Easter fair, spring fair. So just something pop up and try it is one way of doing it. You could have some kind of guided session or guided retreat. And if you do, then you need to think about the timing, the atmosphere, what people will do when they're not walking the labyrinth. because actually if you want to stagger when people walk so you don't get lots of crowds on the labyrinth at once, you need to think, well, some people walk at the beginning of the session and then need something to do after. Something needs something to do at the beginning of the session and then walk after, or they walk at the beginning of the session and do something after. And some people will walk in the middle of the session. So they need something before and something after. So that's where perhaps having some prayer stations around the room can help, as well as the labyrinth, because they could do the prayer stations and then do the labyrinth, or they might trace a labyrinth and then walk a labyrinth. I've done it where I do a little Bible study or a Lectio Divina on a particular passage of the Bible. Someone mentioned Psalm 23, or I did it with Dan's group on the story of Hagar. And we used Lectio Divina to read a passage 4 times in different ways and invite people to consider how God sees them, how God is the God who sees, El Roy, the God who sees. And then they went and walked before or after. So if you're doing a guided session, it's really beautiful and it's very powerful, but it takes a bit more planning. And that's why you've got handouts that's got some questions on it that actually helps you think about how to structure and the practicalities of doing a guided session. And then the other thing is perhaps a carousel of activities is the easiest way to manage that time, so that you've got people do different things at different times, and that's all part of the setup of what you're doing. And that's how I've done it in school. So when I did some stuff with year 5s and year 6s, thinking about their transition into year 6 or their transition into secondary school, we had the teachers they got the kids making some labyrinths on corrugated card with rope, not rope, but string. So they had a drawing and they made their labyrinth by sticking down the string, and then the string acted as the walls for the kids to trace between. And then on the playground, we had the kids drawing with chalk, and they had some handouts, but they were able with a TA to do some free tracing and drawing, and some, starting with a spiral and then trying a basic pattern with bullseyes and then a seed pattern. And I'll show you those in a minute. I've got those on a slide. And then the third carousel of activities was actually walking a labyrinth that I had drawn out on the playground. And then at the end of the day, I painted it with acrylic paint. So at the end of the day, the school actually had that labyrinth then permanently, well, until it washes away with the rain and wear. But, it'll last a year or 2 before it wears down. And they walked the labyrinth as their third activity. And then the children carouseled around those activities every sort of half an hour. So it was an hour and a half session, something like that, perhaps with a 15-minute intro, and then an hour and a half carouselling every half an hour. And we actually did that when in the summer when COVID allowed. And that gave time for hand washing in between as well, if they were sharing equipment. So that's one idea. And we did talk to the year 6, and the teachers talked to the year 6s about how they could think about their transition to to secondary school or to year 6. And they had done some preparation beforehand. And because they had the relationship with the kids already, it felt important that they did that preparation. Although I referred to it and talked to them about how they could think about year 6, I didn't know them well enough to have the rapport with them to do about the mental health, the emotional health, that kind of stuff. The teachers did that because they had the rapport with the children. And there was one girl that really struggled with it, actually, because she did get upset and she was very anxious about secondary school. So the teachers were on hand to care for her. And then we had a couple of students who were very special needs, and actually they responded amazingly to the labyrinth. Especially children with ADHD and autism seemed to love them because it's one path and it helps contain them, and they're guided all the way round and all the way back. And there were some children who arrived at the session very, very hyped up, kind of running around the playground, even One child came in, ran round and round and round, kind of swirling in their movements and wailing at the same time, as everybody else came in quite calmly. And I just said to him and his TA, do you want to walk it while we get started? And he walked it, and he just completely calmed down. He completely changed, his whole body language changed, and he was so much more grounded and then able to join in the rest of the activities. And I think that's one of the reasons why the schools really wanted us to go in and do this and give them a labyrinth, because it's similar to the pathways and the activities they would get the kids walking to help ground them and calm them down in their sessions. So think about the activity you want to do and what kind of activity. And here's lots of pictures to give you ideas. So over on the top left, you know, putting it out in a church hall, having a guided labyrinth session. You can see just across the front of that picture, there was art equipment out. There was some hand labyrinths. There were also some cards, a little bit like this, like just an A4 sheet with some questions or prompts on it, the kind of thing you might put with a prayer station, you know, that just guides people so that you can have some sharing beforehand and sharing after, and then they've got the choice of doing some art or these stations or walking the labyrinth. Then across on the picture with me, that's actually one I made on the drive and underneath. So that was at our house, and we made one on the drive during lockdown. So we adapted it to be a rainbow, and we drew it out in chalk, and you can see the chalk painting underneath with my feet in it. So that was just drawn out in chalk, and you might draw them out in chalk on a school playground or a church car park or somewhere else public, and then invite people to walk. Or it might be part, I don't know if you're in Frodsham. I had some churches in Frodsham ask me about this, and they said they'd got a village kind of fair where people, the businesses and the churches and the other organisations in the village would actually put things on, and it kind of had a wellness and mental health aspect to it. So the church decided they wanted to do a labyrinth, and they were going to do something in the car park at the church, and that would be their offering for the winter fair, and they would have people there to welcome it and guide with a handout and to care for people if something came up for them. Over on the right in the grass is one we built with that same school, actually, and the children painted the bricks. So you can see the coloured bricks that make the walls of the labyrinth. And the children did some work in their classes about their school values. So the school had 4 values, and the children painted their blocks based on their kind of wishes and dreams and prayers for their loved ones. And then the school values were painted on some of the bricks too. And then the bricks helped make up the labyrinth. So that was another way of getting the school involved. They actually wanted a permanent one in the grass. Or you could go to a place where one is already made. So the bottom left-hand corner in grass, that was a session I did with mums, because I do a lot of birth work with mums. So they were either antenatal or postnatal, and they were walking a labyrinth that was already made as part of a retreat on a particular theme. So when they came, they knew what the theme was, and then they could interpret it how they wanted. In the middle, in that very grand church, very beautiful church, that was a cancer charity. They asked me to come and bring the labyrinth for them. And the people there were reflecting on their journey with cancer, whether it was in remission or just found out or having chemo, wherever they were at. And we talked about that journey and how significant it is, and who is with them on the journey, who is helping them, that kind of thing. And then they walked the labyrinth for themselves too. And then down the bottom, there's a picture of the town hall. The bottom right picture is when we did this in the town hall. You can see the coat of arms on the far wall. So we had activities for people to do. So if you've got people coming with limited mobility or hearing impairment, or you just don't know who is going to turn up, having a number of activities that would suit different people was good. So we had pencils and paper plates. so that children or adults could draw a labyrinth on their paper plate. We had some wooden labyrinths for finger tracing. So if someone couldn't walk a labyrinth, they could finger trace it and they could make a paper plate one. And then we had the labyrinth for walking. If you want your labyrinth to be kind of big enough and wide enough for people to go round on a wheelchair, and I mean, we have one in Canterbury at Pilgrim's Hospice, and I'm not sure, it might be that theirs is wide enough for wheelchairs. You've just got to think about the width of the path that they'd be going round, because if the path is a bit wider, it might be easier for them to navigate as they go round on their wheelchair. Or provide that range of activities so that even if they can't walk it, they can finger trace instead. And then there are another couple of pictures here. You can see the rainbow labyrinth. That's the one we painted on the playground of the school. And then you can see us making an example of making one and painting it. And that's similar to the one we made with Dan and the churches, some of the people from churches in Manchester. So in terms of doing this with children or completely starting from scratch, so some of you asked about Messy Church or children in schools or transition, that kind of thing, or starting with scratch, perhaps with a creative group. Perhaps your church has a creative group or a mental health creative group. Then this might be a really nice way in. A labyrinth can just be a spiral. So if you can draw a spiral, then you've got a labyrinth, because it's one path in and one path back out. Yeah, so you can start there, and a spiral can be a square spiral or a triangle spiral or a hexagon spiral or whatever. It can be a butterfly spiral, whatever you want it to be. And the picture underneath is a picture Dan sent me really recently. Thank you, Dan. And I think it's Play-Doh or Fimo, and they had a go at making spiral labyrinths on some dough. So that's a simple way in. Also, next to the spirals is a really simple way of making a labyrinth that doesn't require a complicated pattern to do it. You just draw bullseyes, increasingly getting bigger, and then you divide up the bullseyes in these ways, so it then creates a path going round. And there are a few ideas like that. If you Google make a labyrinth, simple ways to make a labyrinth, you can find more ideas like this, where you start with the bullseyes and then you just take out some of the lines or add some lines. And I've seen some people do this. They had, in their garden, they had a patio made of blocks like that got increasingly bigger. And they just drew some lines on their patio blocks and removed one of the blocks for where you want to be able to get in. And they adapted their circular patio to be a labyrinth by doing this. So that's another possibility. At the bottom is the simple start of a seed pattern. So some labyrinths are drawn from a seed pattern. So this cross and the dots are the beginning of the seed, and then you join them up. So the top of the cross with the red line joins to the first dot on the right. And then you go across to the dot on the left and it joins round to the next cross. And then you go round to the next mark, which is the cross on the left, and it joins round with the dark blue line to the dot. And you just keep following it round. And then that's how you actually, from scratch, draw a 7-circuit labyrinth. Okay, so you can get seed patterns that are even more complicated that draw a bigger labyrinth, but that's a very simple one. And I started with those with the children. So we did spirals, then we did bullseyes, then we did simple seed patterns. And then for some of the most able, I gave them the seed pattern to do this and challenged them to go away and draw one of these from the more complicated seed pattern. And some of them did do it. If you've got kids who are really spatially aware, they're gifted, perhaps they're going to be future engineers and mathematicians, they will run with it, they will love it, and they get really addicted to it. And then finally, over on the right, you've got an example of how you can make a labyrinth just with 2 very long ropes. So, you know, the top one's just 1 rope, and then if you've got a red rope and a green rope, and there's a number of ideas there about how you could draw a labyrinth out in a car park or a hall or somewhere, or a big lounge, maybe if you've got a big house, just with some ropes, and then they walk between the lines of the ropes. And someone mentioned the idea of the labyrinth being created as people come and as they arrive. And I know there was a church in Parr in St Helens, and they brought food bank items. And they had the labyrinth very subtly drawn out, marked out. And then everybody bought food bank items and then put them around the labyrinth. So by the end of the day, the food bank items made the labyrinth, which is just beautiful, absolutely lovely. And you could potentially, you could write a press release about it. You could ask the press to come. They could take photos. It could help advertise your food bank, or whatever it is that you are passionate about in your church, in your community. And, you know, it's a really visual way of engaging people in spirituality and service. It's very lovely. I thought it was a beautiful idea. Those previous ideas could be something you do in Messy Church. I know some of you asked about Messy Church. So those are things you might do in Messy Church, and you might actually have the labyrinth out for them to walk. Or Dan said, if you book the labyrinth, there's actually 4 finger tracing labyrinths in with it that can be used as well. So you might have the finger tracing labyrinths out for people to use as part of a prayer station. You know, so one of the prayer stations could be a labyrinth with one of the handouts, and the other prayer stations might be something else. Or with your Messy Church group, you might invite them up in small groups as part of the carousel of activities to trace a labyrinth or to walk a labyrinth, if you've got room. It's really, if you're leading a session in person and making it a guided session, it's really important to think about timing. And this is one of the key things that takes a little bit of maths to work out. Because if you look at those pictures at the bottom of the screen, I'm guessing the picture in the bottom in the middle is where people have just turned up to walk the labyrinth at Chartres, that's in Paris. They've just turned up to walk it. But what you end up can get is lots of clusters of people, and then people end up, it makes it disjointed and it's hard to get round people. And if you're having to keep stepping aside to let someone pass, or keep stepping aside to let someone pass. What if you're leading a guided session, then perhaps more ideally, you want something more like the picture at the bottom on the right, where you only have 5 or 6 people on the labyrinth at a time. And then if you want something like that, then you need to stagger when they begin walking the labyrinth. And if, let's say, with your synod labyrinth, let's say on average, it takes half an hour to walk in and walk out again. You need to take your half an hour for walking and then add on to that the staggered times of people starting. Yeah. So on your handout that says about planning a labyrinth, I've given you some examples of how to work out the maths for that. But if I try and get this right off the top of my head, if it's half an hour walking, and say you have 6 people who are going to walk, one person's going to walk at 0 minutes. The next person walks at 5 minutes. The next person walks at 10 minutes. The next person walks at 15 minutes. The next person walks at 20 minutes, etc., etc., etc. Then you've got to add the other half hour on for the staggered walk. So it's likely to take an hour in total if you start them off in 5-minute increments. 5 minutes is quite a long time. You probably can stagger them every 2 to 3 minutes and it will work okay. Yeah, but you need to do the maths beforehand so that when you advertise the session, you know that you've got enough time for them to walk without feeling rushed. And think about what you want to top and tail the session with. Do you want to have opening activities? Do you want to have closing activities? How long do those take? And then how long is the moving time in the middle? So it's just kind of thinking about those kind of project management things, those timing things, time management things. The other thing is I've got those two pictures of two types of labyrinths there, because your synod labyrinth is like the one on the left. It's a classic 7-circuit labyrinth. And I like those because, one, they're really easy to draw, but two, they're quite quick to walk. Even if you walk slowly, it will probably take around half an hour, a bit more or a bit less. If you have a really beautiful, intricate Chartres labyrinth, like the one on the right, it's stunning, but it's going to take at least an hour. It takes a lot longer. So think about the pattern you use, because the pattern you use is going to define how long it takes to walk it. So that's why I tend to use the classic 7-circuit, because it's manageable for most people. If they've never done something reflective and quiet before, it's doable in the time you've got. So moving through, how do you get a labyrinth if you want to get hold of one? So on your handout, you've got a list of where to find them. You've also got the Synod labyrinth that you can book from Dan Harris. Dan's here today, and there's his email. With the labyrinth, it comes in a rolling suitcase, and it's got 4 handheld labyrinths as well that you can borrow. Dan, do you want to chip in anything about that?
Yeah, thanks, Aileen. Yeah, the labyrinth is a brilliant resource. I'm really grateful to Aileen for coming, and also for Sheila Coop actually gave the seed idea originally, so she's not here, but can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, if you want to borrow the labyrinth, all you have to do is email me and pick it up, use it, and return it to me, and it's as simple as that. It's there for everyone to use. I think we're going to store it at Radcliffe URC. We were thinking of putting it in the Synod office, but the trouble is we need a hall to occasionally get it out just to make sure it's clean and all that. And so Synod hasn't got the space to do that. Hence why we're looking at after it's up at Radcliffe. But please feel free to use it from wherever you are in the Synod. It's free of charge because the Synod's paid for it. It's quite an expensive resource. But the nice thing about it is it's made by us. So the labyrinth itself is on a journey. And I want to try and keep a track of where it goes, because that's part of its story too. So please do come and get it. Lee's, I think, our first person to book it so far for a couple of weeks' time. But go ahead. Thank you very. Yes, you can borrow it from Mersey Synod. You just have to come and get it and bring it back to me. Thank you.
Dan, I think it's also just important to say the labyrinth is just for indoor use. So you can't use this specific one. So you can't use it on your car park. And also it's 7 meters by 7 meters. So make sure your room is big enough, not like I did this weekend with the away day with the elders. My room wasn't big enough. So I've got the labyrinth at the moment, but yeah, just make sure your room is 7 by 7 before you borrow it.
It's massive.
Yeah.
The paths on it, in terms of the actual paths that people walk on, they're either 30 or 45 centimeters wide. I can't quite remember. It was one or the other, but then they're not really, really wide, but it still gets massive because you've got so many circuits going out in both directions. Yeah, and I know the labyrinth, Dan's put some instructions in about how to keep it clean, how to care for it. You've got to take shoes off, walk with socks. You might need to hoover it afterwards if it's got really fluffy or bits of stuff comes off people's socks. Then you might want to hoover it before you fold it all back up again and send it back to Dan. So it's a fantastic resource. It's wonderful that you've got this available to you. Also, you can get handheld labyrinths if you want one for yourself or a group. You can get them off places like Etsy, and this is one that I was gifted. It's really gorgeous, and I love that it says breathe on it. That's really nice because that's part of what I do. And this one's made in clay, and I ordered off eBay a wooden cheese board to stick it onto because I was worried the clay might break. So that could be a solution if you're wanting it to be a little bit more durable. And that's very, very beautiful. I bought this one, same from the list there. I got this one from Rowan Humberstone. They're a not-for-profit company that work with disabled people, and they make wooden products, including different types of labyrinths. And the disabled people get involved in doing that. And then they sell these, and they are absolutely gorgeous. So this is one that I got from them, and they're more affordable than a lot of the labyrinths that are on sale. This one was the first.
You can't actually see them because you've got still sharing the screen.
Okay, that's fine. I will stop share. Thank you very much for flagging that up. Brilliant. Thank you. So this one was from Etsy, and it's clay, and I got a cheese board to stick it onto. This one is from Rowan Humberstone. Again, they do Chartres ones as well, the medieval 4/4 ones if you want them, but I like the classic ones. This is the first one I bought, which is much bigger, and I bought it with birthday present money. It was £60 or £70 about 9 years ago, and it's oak, so they can be really, really expensive, but they are very beautiful and they're going to last forever. Yes, so that one's very, very, very nice. All of them are very nice. But I've also made some. So I don't know if you can see over my shoulder, I've got something over there that's red. That's the first ever labyrinth I made. And I made it using kind of flour dough. But I wouldn't advise doing that because it has a habit of cracking, and the poor thing is kind of falling apart a bit because it cracks over time and it doesn't last very well. What's much better is making it in something like air drying clay. So this is air drying clay. You can get it from places like packs like this, from the Works, the Range, Hobbycraft. It's only about £4 a pack. And this could be something you do with your messy church or with schools. As well as perhaps your house group or a creative meditative group that you have in your church. And this I made in lockdown. The kids were making some other models while I was at the table with them in lockdown, and that's why it's rainbow coloured. So this was one I made in lockdown. And if you'd like to make something like this, then I'm actually doing a workshop in about 2 weeks' time on March the 26th, where you can come and make one of these along with me. We're going to make it live in the session. So if I just share screen again, because I don't have lots more labyrinths to show you, but I can show you the advert for this. So it's on Saturday, the 26th of March from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and we're actually going to make the labyrinths live in the session. And I will send you handouts so that if you want this pattern, you can have this pattern, or if you want to pick a different pattern, you can pick a different pattern. And I've got a really simple way of making the pattern get onto the clay so that you make it in air drying clay. And then within the 2 hours, you should easily have finished your labyrinth. It can dry overnight. And then the next day, if you want, you can paint it with acrylic paint. And that's what I've done here. I've painted it with acrylics. So that link, I don't know, Dan, would you be able to copy and paste that link like you did before, or somebody just into the chat? But I know it's also on your Synod newsletter about it, or you can scan the QR code and it will take you to Eventbrite where to book. And the cost of the workshop plus your air drying clay will be about half the price of buying one. So it's a nice way of doing it as a team. We can all come back together if you want to, and we can make them. If you want to come as a group, there are prices on Eventbrite that give you a discount. So it's less, if you gather a group of 4 on screen, it will be less than paying individually to come and join in. Because I thought some of you might possibly want to come as house groups or church groups. So that's in a couple of weeks' time if you want to make one. So we've covered a load. I have told you loads and loads and loads. And I appreciate that for some of you who've not looked at this at all before, it could feel really overwhelming and it could feel like it's too much. So I've got some more questions, and we wanted to do another breakout group for the last 10 minutes of the session that takes us up till 12. Now, the session officially finishes at 12, but I'm going to stay on for, you know, I can be on till 20 past, something like that, if Darlene is still around to take individual questions. And she's put thumbs up, so that's great. But I wanted you to have time to talk about all of this, to wonder about what your next steps might be. So do you have the seed of an idea, or something you've already planned? What would you like your next steps to be? And if you're thinking you want to try something in the coming year, then how might you break that down so it's manageable? Now, some people plan from now forward to when they want to do it. But what I've found is sometimes it's easier to actually plan backwards. If you think, right, next summer, I want to do this. Okay, next summer is 4 months' time. Okay, so what do I need to have done 2 weeks before 4 months' time? What do I need to have done a month before? So that's in 3 months' time. What do I need to do in 2 months' time? What do I need to do in a month's time? And then what do I need to do kind of in the coming weeks, this week? What do I do this afternoon to get started, for example? So you might plan forward or plan backwards, whatever works for you. To encourage you, notice what resources you already have available. So you already have a Synod Labyrinth you can book. You already have some handouts I've given you. You might already have a team of people. Notice what you already have. You might live near one of these labyrinths. Yeah. So what resources do you have available to you? Because that might help you feel like, okay, this is manageable. I can do this. I've got some resources available already. Okay. And then who would benefit from this, and how might you involve them in the planning? Ooh, that could be good, couldn't it? If you actually involve them in planning it, it takes the pressure off you. You don't have to do it all yourself. And also they may well feel more they might buy into it more. They might feel like this is actually something they get really excited about because you've involved them in the planning. So I want to give you that time in your breakout group now to wonder about these questions, or some others, if these don't, these aren't relevant for you right this second. So you're okay?
Yeah.
From 10. So yeah, the session would run from 10 till 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the last slide that I've got. There's only one slide left, but it's an opportunity for you to feed back about how you found the session. And the questions in there also invite you to think, how did you kind of feel, and what did you think about, and what did you believe about this whole theme before? And how do you feel, and what do you believe now? So it will help us see whether you feel like, this has made some progress for you, whether there's been a bit of a shift thanks to the session. And then one of the last questions asks, what might your next steps be? That might be really helpful for Darlene and others to see, so that they can help you with your next steps or support you in your next steps. The first questions ask, what worked well and what would be even better if? So you've got the opportunity to say what's been good about our session so far. So you can QR code, or you can follow the link on SurveyMonkey. And I'll ask Darlene to send this out afterwards. But I do know that if people don't fill in the questionnaire then and there, we're very unlikely to get a chance to do it afterwards. So before you go, if you can, please go and fill in that feedback questionnaire, so that the team who have funded this and want to support you in this have some really good feedback about it. So if you don't have to go away straight away after you've answered the questionnaire, then I invite you to stay, and we can do a bit of feeding back from your groups, or we can do some questions. So I'm going to be here. I can be here till about 20 past, half past, and we can do questions and answers and feedback and all that kind of thing. But I do want to acknowledge some of you thought you were going at 12 and you might need to go now. Darlene, do you want to add anything to that? Or Darlene, sorry.
Yeah. No, just thank you very much, Aileen. I think I've learned so much, and I'm sure everyone else did. We've already got 4 bookings for the Synod Labyrinth just from the session. So I'm really pleased that people are taking it up. And yeah, please book the event of making the labyrinth. This is not funded by the Synod. Unfortunately, it will cost you something, and you won't do it through me. It will be through Eventbrite. But I think that's a fantastic. I mean, they spend, I don't know what it is it £10 or something? I think so. Please support that if you want to take it a bit further. Thank you for your time. It was wonderful to see so many people on the screen. And I hope that is something that will bring us all closer to God and create this fun place for the people we work with. But thank you very much, Aileen.
You're welcome.
Thank you.